Welcome to the Common Gavel Podcast, the podcast all about the Maryland Masonic family. The Common Gavel Podcast features news and stories from all across the state of Maryland. Now, from the Grand Lodge of Maryland, here's your host, Director of Communications, Tom Foster.
Hello and welcome to the Common Gavel Podcast, the podcast all about the Maryland Masonic family. We've already had a great month. We had a record turnout at our Harvest Home Day. And we had two contests this year, not just the corn shucking contest, but also our inaugural cornhole contest. And guess what? The same lodge won both. Congratulations to Concordia Lodge number 13. Not only do these guys get a trophy, but more importantly, they've got a year's worth of bragging rights, which is, of course, the real prize. So thanks to everyone who made it such a memorable day. Make sure you check the weekly Compass Points newsletter to find out about more fall fun with your lodge and other lodges all across the state. There are table lodges, Oktoberfests, and of course plenty of Halloween fun. If you're not subscribed to the Compass Points newsletter, just visit mdmasons.org and sign up today. Now let's hear from our Grandmaster and Deputy Grandmaster and get this show started.
Time for the Grand Master's message with the most worshipful Grand Master of Masons in Maryland, Brother Richard P. Nagel.
Fall is definitely here. The air has turned cooler, leaves have been dropping, and lodges are all back in session. With this, I think of a part of our mission for the Grand Lodge, actively teaching the brotherhood of man under the fatherhood of God. Nothing is truer in this statement than brotherhood. I have seen this growing in all areas of the state. I recently attended the 39th anniversary of the Travelers of Washington, D.C. This is a group of Maryland, Virginia, and D.C. Masons who have bound themselves together by commonalities. The main one is being Freemasons. They are a close group of Filipino Masons who support each other in their accomplishments and celebrations. They celebrate families, which is a key component in Masonry. This group is also a strong support for DeMolay, since many of its members had this as their starting point. There are other groups around the state that experience their brotherhood in a similar way. At St. Columba Lodge, they gather at a location known as Site P, basically at the Worship Master's home. They share fellowship and become closer as Masons. Members from local lodges also gather in this fraternalism. Another location is in Carroll County, known as the Builder's Craft. This group has members regionally from lodges and helps with Masonic education and building a stronger community. Non-Masons participate and learn a little bit about the craft, hopefully sparking an interest. This has resulted in new members from Monocacy Lodge. The final location is in Aberdeen, on the military base. It is known as the APG Masonic Club. It was organized by Maryland Masons and has members from Prince Hall, Maryland, and other grand jurisdictions. It strives to make men become better versions of themselves through their service to others. APG is home to many Masons, each dedicated to providing the best support to the American soldier and our surrounding communities. Whether you're already a Mason or looking to become one, pursue what drives you to excel and be a part of the APG Masonic Club. I hope this catches on to other military bases around the state. Harvest Home Day is in the books. The weather was as perfect as the food. A great group of volunteers began early in the morning preparing sausages, pancakes, and coffee for over 1,100 Masons in attendance. The addition of cornhole to the corn husking was an overwhelming success for Concordia Lodge number 13, taking home first place in each. I officially renamed them Concordia Lodge. I want to thank all who attended, and especially the volunteers who gave of their time to keep spreading the fraternalism of Masonry. At the end of the month, we will be inducting new members into the King Solomon Society. These are brothers who have completed the Fellow and Pillar of the Craft, served as Worship Master, and presented a research paper about Masonry. They truly deserve this honor. It will take place at a meeting of the Maryland Masonic Research Lodge, number 239, on October 30th at the Grand Lodge. All are invited to attend the meeting and induction. We are close to the annual session. I have much to share from this past year, along with ideas for the future. We will also be presenting several awards, to include the newly created Zerubbabel Medal for newer Masons. I hope you'll be able to join us on November 16th as we celebrate Maryland Masonry. I look forward to seeing many as we continue doing Masonry while maintaining our integrity and uprightness as Masons each day.
And now, Right Worshipful Deputy Grand Master, Brother Marlon L. Mills.
In my recent travels to lodges, it seems that many are starting to get serious about membership and leadership. You have heard me talk about the fact that out of our 103 lodges in Maryland, we only had 33 new masters last year. That means that 70 masters were serving at least a second term, and many of them were sitting in the East for the 3rd, 6th, 8th, and yes, even 12 times. It seems that membership and leadership are the biggest challenges that we face, and have faced for several years. To me, membership and leadership go hand in hand like soup and sandwiches. Each one is good on its own, but like the Campbell soup jingle, you can't have one without the other. I recently read that any organization that lacks good leadership will fail in both attracting new members and inspiring loyalty and upward mobility in its line of officers. It also creates the perfect situation for a loss of membership and poor leadership development. The article went on to say that ultimately the leaders themselves hold the power to effect change, and that change begins with them, the leaders of each and every lodge. In my humble opinion, the master and wardens are accountable for the outcome of every chair in their lodge. They are the leaders. I will admit that they cannot be held totally responsible for another's work or lack thereof, but they must realize that their work and their actions have a direct impact on the lodge and its members. Good leaders draw good members. The seat in the East may be elusive to some, and it is up to the leadership to be prepared to draw the line between a potential future leader and one who just wants to get by. This is not an easy task for anyone. It requires empathy and the ability to present it tactfully in order not to lose the individual member. From the very first chair, there are a number of ways to measure leadership effectiveness. Does he attend rehearsals? Does he show up on time? Does he study his work for proper presentation? Does he try? Even if he needs help, does he seek that help? The answer to these questions should indicate the type of effectiveness he will play as a future leader of your lodge. If he is not meeting the above requirements for future lodge leadership, the next question becomes what, if anything, can be done to improve the situation or the brother's performance without causing the member to up and quit. Here is where a little tact is very important. Starting a conversation with, "Where in the world have you been? You know that we practice every Monday night at 6:30, might not be the best approach, at least not for a friendly, fraternal, and successful conversation. We are all born with certain talents. For some, ritual or leadership comes naturally. Others may have to work longer or harder. But with practice and coaching, these talents can be honed and become great strengths for the lodge. Letting a man bumble through his work or lectures only hurts him. He will lose constant confidence after constant criticism. Soon he no longer shows up for anything, and eventually he stops paying his dues, and the lodge has lost another member. What are you doing to support your lodge officers and members? How are you helping to prepare future leaders of your lodge? Do you really know your members or line officers? And by this I mean, do you know more than just their names? Yes, we need new masters for our lodges, but at what cost? The cipher book was supposed to be the cure-all. Men would study, learn their work, write from the book, and be ready to go. What happened was that men stopped coming to rehearsal, they did not study from the book, and personal contact among the officers was lost. I have been in lodges this year where the cipher book was open and used in open lodge. And now men are even putting the work on their cell phones. Where does it all end? As J.C. Penney once said, I do not believe in excuses. I believe in hard work as the prime solvent to life's problems. Being the leader of a lodge or part of the line in a lodge requires work and desire to succeed. For hundreds of years, men have led our lodges, helped lead our country, and have done it successfully. I believe that you can as well. I believe that every man can be a success if he just takes the time, has the desire, and the determination to do his part, especially with proper support. I believe in our fraternity, and I believe in you because you have taken the time to listen to this podcast. I thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in our lodges.
Maryland Masons, keep all your personal information up to date. Visit the Grand Lodge of Maryland online at glmd.org. From the Grand Lodge of Maryland, this is the Common Gavel Podcast.
October 31st is, of course, Halloween, but this year, October 31st, also marks the 93rd anniversary of the death of Brother Eric Weiss. You would know him better by his stage name of Harry Houdini. Houdini was initiated in 1923 in St. Cecile Lodge in New York. Because of his busy travel schedule, he wasn't raised as a Master Mason until 1924. He became a Shriner shortly before his death in 1926. Joining us to talk about Harry Houdini is director of the Harry Houdini Museum and a world-renowned magician in her own right, Miss Dorothy Dietrich. Dorothy, thanks for joining us.
And this is Dick Brooks. I'm also a magician, and that's all I've ever done. And I'm a co-director of the museum and co-founder of the museum as well.
Obviously, the name Houdini is synonymous with magic and great escapes. But before we get into that, tell us a little bit about Brother Harry's early days.
It came from a poor family. His dad was a rabbi. He immigrated to Wisconsin, of all places, in the United States from Budapest, Hungary, actually Pest, Hungary, and came to America. It turns out that his dad was very strict, religious, and very old world, and basically that community was more reform and didn't realize, and it didn't work out really well for his dad. He ended up losing that position and eventually ended up in New York City working in a necktie factory, which had to be a big come down for someone of his stature. But so Houdini, as a young man, he came to the United States when he was 4 years old, and early on he became interested in just kind of surviving, and he did get interested in magic once he had run away from home. He was 12 years old to seek his fortune, and he ended up at first in Galveston, Texas, of all places, and ended up in the circus arts. He started working with circuses, and then ended up back in New York City, where his father ended up working, and that's where he became fully involved in magic. Well, one thing led to another, and the man became not just a good magician or a great magician, but also very well loved in the United States. And
throughout the world.
And throughout the world. His good friend, T. Nelson Downs, who called himself the King of Coins, told Harry, you need a gimmick. You need some kind of a gimmick. And so because he was the King of Coins, he thought, well, you're great at cards. Why don't you become the King of Cards? And so that's where he started at doing his magic with the card tricks. And there is film footage of Houdini doing some brilliant moves and manipulation with cards. And so then his buddy T. Nelson Downs ended up in Europe, and he told Houdini, go to Europe. It's amazing in Europe. You just need to learn a few words in each language, and you can travel the entire world, and there's so much work there. So he hit the road and went to Europe. And
actually, his early years, he spent the longest 2 years of the two longest engagements of his entire life with the Welsh Brothers Circus, which traveled all through Northeast Pennsylvania. So that's one of the reasons the museum is in Pennsylvania. It was originally in New York City. Houdini spent the two longest engagements of his whole life in Northeast Pennsylvania. And in that early period, before he became a star, traveling through this area, he developed about 90% of the stunts that would make him a star soon after leaving here for that last time of that sequence. He developed the chain escape, the rope escape, the straitjacket escape, the metamorphosis, which is a quick change, which they still do today.
One thing Harry Houdini is known for is that he really fought against phony psychics and mediums as a personal mission. For someone whose day job was all about deceiving people, why did he take such offense to these types of charlatans?
People in those days were great believers. They had a lot of tragedy between World War I, and then there was the great epidemic where people were dying from disease. So millions of people lost their lives. So they were the public was grieving, and this is what made the rise of the spiritualist, quote unquote, movement, or the spiritualist religion. So Conan Doyle would have done anything, as many people would do, to believe that he could still contact his relatives that he grieved for so much. So unfortunately, the spiritualists, there were spiritualists that took advantage of this.
Oh, it was a hot market, boy, because so many people were grieving. So many people had lost family members or loved ones that they needed to get some kind of closure, that there is a heaven and that they can communicate with their loved one. And so Houdini was furious, not just that they were conning people, but they were actually using theatrical methods and magic tricks to make it appear as though they were getting communication with the spirit world. Well, unfortunately, a lot of them were just tricksters and conning people for a few bucks, but some of them were really in it for the gold. They would convince people through several different meetings, and bit by bit by bit, they would convince people that they had the contact with that loved one, and then say, if you want me to continue my spiritual work and make sure that you go to heaven and you're connected with your loved one, that you should bequeath your inheritance to me, so I can
to the movement,
so I can keep this spiritual work going, and blah blah blah. And Houdini was furious. He had started as a young kid and had read a book called Revelations of a Spirit Medium, and it was a tutorial for how to con people, how to do it. And Houdini was just fuming that this was who's going to buy this?
There is some controversy surrounding his death. Give us the details on how Brother Harry ended up dying at a fairly young age.
Yeah, the way he died, it's sad because there are a few things that are unfortunate. That first of all, Houdini had to be a pretty macho kind of a guy. You know, I mean, he was getting beat up all the time in his escapes. You know, he was doing some pretty rough stuff, so his body was. He's used to beating up his body, you know. So when he was in Canada, I'm going to let Dick tell this part of the story.
Yeah, Houdini went to Montreal, which is where that's where he was punched in the stomach. The person that punched him was Jocelyn Gordon Whitehead. So Gordon Whitehead goes to at least 2 performances of Houdini in Montreal. Now he's also tries to get backstage with Houdini. He says, I have to bring a book to Houdini, and he's knocking on the backstage door. They let him in. As Houdini's lying on the couch reading his mail, he says to Houdini, you're strong, right? He says, my stomach's strong, but here, feel my biceps. Hard as a rock when I do the straitjacket escape, the rope escape. We believe Jocelyn Gordon Whitehead was setting up Houdini. Without any other warning, as Houdini's lying there reading his mail, Jocelyn Gordon Whitehead, without giving Houdini a chance to get up, begins to punch Houdini in the stomach as hard as he can. Devastating punch after punch. To show you the atmosphere in the dressing room, one of the other two guys grab him, pull him away, and yell out loud, what are you, crazy? Now Houdini is tricked. He does not realize, by a strange coincidence, totally unconnected to the punches, he also happens to have, at the same time in his life, an appendix problem. Being the kind of guy he is, he ignores it. He figures it's the sore punches. From the punches, he's going to get better. He's a get-fit kind of guy, mind over matter. 2 days later, he has 102 fever. They have to dress him to put him on the train to go to Detroit. He realizes this is different. He telegrams ahead to have a doctor at the theater, the Garrick Theater in Detroit. The doctor examines him. He lays him backstage on the floor. He says, it's worse. You now have 104 fever. I believe it's your appendix. You should go to the hospital. But the theater manager, owner, says, wait a minute. We never sold so many tickets. The place is packed. I'll have to give back some of the money. You'll have to put up some of the money. Please, Mr. Houdini, do you think you could just manage to do the show? Houdini had a little thing in his contract that if he did not do a show, he would have to pay, I forget the number, but several thousands of dollars to the manager of the theater for the backing out. So Houdini, that might have been the reason Houdini did the show. Now he doesn't go to the hospital afterward. He goes to the hotel. That night he telegrams or phones his doctor in New York. He says, are you crazy? Get to the hospital. His wife insists that he goes to the hospital. He gets to the hospital. They found in that week or so's time, the broken appendix got infected. They gave Houdini 6 hours to live. In the morning, there will be no Houdini. There was headlines all over the country. But Houdini, being so strong and willful, he didn't die in 6 hours, 16 hours, 1 day, 2 days, 5, 6 days. He held out, died on the 7th day, and of all days, Halloween, October 31st, 1926. And it's become a legendary thing. We have his death certificate at the museum on display. It's just unbelievable. If you wrote it in a storybook, magician, Ghostbuster, dies on Halloween, you'd say it's a kiddie story, but that's how it all happens.
This is the Common Gavel Podcast.
Edward Highmiller is the curator of the Maryland Masonic Museum, which is celebrating its 200th anniversary this year. It's been a little while since we've had Edward on the show, so let's check in and see what's happening with the library and museum. Welcome back, Edward. So, for folks who are new to the show or new to Freemasonry, let's do a quick review. Give us a little history on the Maryland Masonic Museum.
The museum is the oldest Masonic museum in the United States that we know of, and was founded back in 1819 by the membership here in Maryland to preserve the memory of the heroes of the American Revolution, and the collections just grew to encompass Masonic things as well.
Tell us a few of the highlights of the collection.
Yes, the apron collection spans 4 centuries and covers regalia not only from different jurisdictions within the United States, but also Europe, Australia, South America, quite extensive. And then we have things from the founding fathers, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson. So there's a little bit of something for everybody. We have a list of different talks that lodges can pick from, and we're more than happy to share the collection with the wider audience.
Some might be confused that although the museum is housed here at the Grand Lodge campus, it actually is a separate entity entirely, right?
The museum, when it was first founded, fell under the auspices of members of Concordia Lodge. Then it was overseen by the Maryland Masonic Veterans Association. And then finally, in the 1940s, they established a separate board for the museum. And we finally got a registered 501c3 established in 2006. So there is no question we are definitely separate from the Grand Lodge.
Tell us about the Friends of the Museum.
The Friends of the Museum is an auxiliary group that we have that anybody can join. It's a $50 membership for a year. It's an annual membership. And you get the museum newsletter with that, as well as deductions on, or discounts on the museum programs and events, as well as first notification of those programs and events when they're announced. We have a lot of lodges and individuals who are members of the Friends of the Museum, and to get more information on that, they can go to the museum website at mdmasonicmuseum.org, and then go to the contact page, and they can contact us directly, or they can actually call here at the museum as well.
The library also has a pretty unique collection. Tell us exactly what kinds of things are kept in our library.
The library is a little bit of a catch-all, again, like the museum is. And the earliest book we have is from 1482. It was formerly used in the Vatican City. Not a big surprise, it's a Bible. Then we have a first edition Martin Luther Bible from 1640 to 1660. And then we pick up with Masonic publications in the 1740s and to current day.
Now, I know you're a curator, so you probably don't want to pick a favorite, but what's your favorite piece in our entire collection?
The collection, as I said, does have quite a variety to it. But one of the things that usually surprise most of our visitors is the oldest thing we have in the collection, which is from a temple in Luxor, Egypt. It's part of an Egyptian column capital, and it's from 2200 BCE, and that's a pretty impressive object when you see it.
And if folks need more information about the museum, where's the best place to find out more?
The best way to visit the museum is to go to the museum website and go to our contacts page and contact us. We're open by appointment, so we're open whenever whenever somebody wants to visit the museum, they just let us know and we make it happen.
Edward Highmiller, curator of the Maryland Masonic Museum, thanks for joining us.
The podcast all about the Maryland Masonic family. This is the Common Gavel Podcast.
That will wrap up this October edition of the Common Gavel Podcast, and we thank you for tuning in. Join us again next month when we have plenty of more information all about Maryland Freemasonry.
If you've got questions, comments, or ideas for the Common Gavel, email us at podcast@glmd.org. If you'd like to become a Freemason, visit askamarylandmason.com. The Common Gavel Podcast is produced by Rich Maynard Thurfield in association with the Grand Lodge of Maryland. Your host has been Tom Foster, and I am your announcer, Martin Persley.